So what do we have here? We have a full thickness Telecaster in a beautiful sort of, what looks like to me is a kind of thin wash paint or stain, as you can see, and so the grain the grain's sticking through underneath, so it looks pretty nice, and it's got a hand applied clear finish on top as well. Can't remember if it was nitro or some other poly finish, but anyway, it does the job, and it has a much loved kind of feel to it, even though, you know, obviously it's a bit rough at the edges with the bloops of paint and stuff. And Phil's taken some time to take care of this neck, which is quite a chunky neck, but actually it's very nice to play. And I think it's had a bit of shaping going on here, because it's definitely not fully, what's the word? Yeah, it's not even all the way. It's got a definite character to it, but nice and chunky. And yes, it has a thing on top that says Fender, which is okay. We don't get too upset. Standard split post tuners. What looks like jumbo frets here, and slightly high action on the first fret and stuff. But we're going to take the action down a little bit all round and see where we get to. But so not a terrible lot to do. These are, I've forgotten the name now, and Phil will have to forgive me for this. The name of the very high quality bespoke sort of boutique pickups here, and having played it for an hour this afternoon, I really enjoyed it. I thought I'm not usually a great Telecaster fan, but I really like this. There's a lot of this has been refretted and kind of hacked away at a bit, really, sort of roll in, rounded and rolled, but still it plays and it feels good to play. So what's the point in complaining if it still has character and feels great? You know, and this is I think this is a really good example, and you can look at how kind of mucky the refret is, you know, or the fingerboard is after the refret for various reasons, where it's been done along the way. But so it's definitely not a clean machine, but hello, I've just lost you. The playing is in the proof, the pudding is in the eating. You know, it was great fun to play. It's got a real character to it, and I enjoyed it. Playing it for about an hour and didn't want to put it down. So it's not going to be a really long one, this, so I'm going to take the plate off and have a look. There was an issue about how this is propped up under there, but it's really solidly fixed, so I don't really want to go messing around because it's not broken, so we don't want to necessarily fix it. I think the nut, as I say, is a bit sharp at the edges, so we can probably just sculpt that a little bit. We want a bit of a better angle over here, and it may be that the nut is running a bit flat. I found this, there's a little bit of zing there, swing, but nothing major. I found this a bit over, just a little bit too much in the way of high ends, and also, by the way, the pots are starting to spin. They're jamming a little bit. I don't know what's wrong with this. Halfway, they're latching on something, and it's not a latching pot, but they also want to spin around, so I think we need to hoik these pots off and just tighten them down again. But yeah, I had to work hard to tame the treble on this, because it was quite aggressive in the high frequency department, and it was not helped just slightly by this, I think perhaps just a little lack of break angle. Although the strings are playing, they may be just playing a little bit flat through without enough angle. Anyhow, so what we're going to do, I think we're going to attend to the action first, the slight reduction, and then we'll go into the sort of fret leveling part of things. So I'm going to put you up a little higher today, just because I've got a thing in the way there that's kind of in the way. There we are. So let's just check what we've got. Nice. Tiny bit of fret slap, but not so much as to get in the way of enjoying this thing. So let's take a look at the action. Get the measurables out. It's not going to be very high to begin with. Okay, we're looking at, we're about spot on 2, I would say. 2 there and 1.6 there. So I'm just going to make a note of that for my own purposes. What did I say? 2 and 1.6. Let's see what we have in the way of relief. Now the thing about this is that Phil's been playing this and likes this the way it is, so I'm not going to mess about. So there's some relief in there. I'm not going to go oh, we must have more relief. It plays nicely without me adding more relief in, just because you might say. Now I may do if we find ourselves choking out. That's minor. That will probably be eased by the fret leveling. One of the things I can see down here, I think, is judging by the way the strings are, it feels to me like the string tree here is a tiny bit off. So we can probably we can put one in right on top of it where it is now. But once I've done the fret leveling, possibly move it just a tiny fraction. Oops, I didn't realise there are a bunch of new ones. But they are Music Lily's finest. Not a low one really, aren't we? I'm not a great fan of these metal ones, but Phil, you know, I tried to say to him, come on, get a Tusq one on there, and he said, nope, I know what I want, and I can live perfectly well with one of those. So I'm thinking, right, you certainly can. It's just a preference of mine, and I sometimes pass my preferences and obsessions on to other people who don't deserve to inherit them. But so these are quite livable with if you're used to it. It's just not my favourite thing. I prefer to have that extra bit of Tusqification, you know, the extra lubrication, shall we call it. So just for now, for doing the setup thing, I'm going to put this back in where it is, and move it if it needs to. I'll look at it when it's in place. If it doesn't look any problem, then we shall leave it where it is. Let's see what improvement we make on this angle. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. I think we'll go right down to where it sits on the. So you've got quite a bend on it there. We'll take it down to the lowest point that this little short barrel will do, and that should be enough. Okay, so I think that's got a bit more of a break angle. Yeah, it's not a ton, but it's more than it was. Okay, so we're going to say we're okay with the neck relief at the moment. We've got 1.6 or 2 and 1.6 over there. I'm going to get my nut files out just in case, because it's got bone. I want to make sure that it's got enough, it's moving through there freely enough. I'm going to go with my 0.3 millimeters measure, and that's all a bit above. In fact, the high E is probably the highest of them all. So what I'm going to do with these, I'm just going to very carefully adjust the 17. I'm going to adjust the slots just a tiny bit. Adjust them just a tiny bit. We're in tune. There's very little reduction needed, or fairly little. But what I want is just to make sure this is pointing backwards and is wide enough so that there isn't any catching. And then once that's done and we're at the right heights and stuff, then we have an option after that to reduce the nut itself. And actually what I'll do is I'll just mainly do it at this end to take away the sharp bit. So also the good thing about these Hosco ones is they definitely open up the slot a bit more, so they leave them unlikely to grab. For me, one of the reasons I don't tend to use bone is because I find that it can still leave a bit of a grabbing friction. Or put another way, you have to work long and hard to get rid of any friction on there. People say, well, so what? Work long and hard then. What I'm also trying to do whence doing this. Let's have a bit of a zoom up, shall we? One of the things I'm trying to do here is to make sure that I'm getting as much of an angle backwards over the nut as is possible. But as anyone who's done this will know, it's very difficult to do that without touching down on the maple, that thing, end of the fingerboard, and take a chunk out of that. Sometimes you have to do it because there's no alternative. If they've put too much wood, or too much of a length of fingerboard behind there, and you still need to get down to the correct angle, you have to have the angle rather than worry about the cosmetics of that little piece of wood. Although, you know, some people might be uncomfortable doing that. It's one of those function over form, please, type of deals. Okay, now I'm going to leave that there for a minute, because what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to tweak down. That was the highest one. I just wanted to see how far down we need to go. I'm going to just tweak the the action down to where we're going to aim for it. So this is going to be, we want to go down to just over 1.5, which will be just over there. Let's do half a turn, half a turn. We need to retune, obviously, in a minute. Right, that's fractionally above, and that one needs to go back up. That's what you get when you have an averaged one of those barrels. So I just hold it in there and look at it. Get the light right. One way, silly chap. Okay. It's a bit fiddly to get there. We're going to go down a bit down. The idea will be, once I, oh sorry, I've lost you. Didn't really think about you, did I? Ah, do forgive me. Do forgive me. I'm just taking care of the height down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this from down by eye. And then so on with this one, and then bring this one down, so. Now I'll just tweak them back from there. Get in place, would you? Thank you. Right. So I start on the far side. We're going to go a little bit higher. We want 1 point. Well, we want a bit less than 1.6. 1.25 should do. And that's 1.25. Here that's got to be a bit more. 1.25 and a fraction. Here we want a little bit more again. Okay, we have 1.3-ish. And this one, that's probably there already. 1.5, so down a little tiny bit with that one. 1.2 up again with that one. Now we're going to go. I need 1.5 or 1.6 out of this. Okay, now I'm going to just tune up. If I can find where I put the, here it is, behind you. Sorry about that. Tuning fork. go back to where I was a minute ago. That should be close. It's pretty close. I'll leave that there and we'll go to this one, which is a fair bit above. We'll go on the 13. Again, concentrating on backward slot, widening it and reducing it, all at the same time. The amount of difference a little bit of lowering at this end does to the amount of energy it takes to fret chords is quite astonishing, really. I think we're good enough on that one. We're same as the one before, so that's good. Yeah, that tiny little action adjustment results in a much lighter playing action down there, which gives you sometimes you don't even really realise it until you've played it a while and realise that you've got what feels like more energy than before. I found a similar thing happened when I first played with an SG. I realised that I couldn't understand why I wasn't enjoying the experience much. But it turned out that it was all to do with the neck heaviness, and I was very unconsciously finding myself holding up the neck all the time. And I didn't realise I was doing it. It wasn't kind of massively conscious, but it was a little bit of extra effort going into there to hold it up. And when I sort of fixed it and did some counterbalancing and so on and so forth, I was amazed at the difference. In fact, what I ended up doing was making a whole new guitar for myself with a balanced neck, which I really enjoy by comparison to playing a neck heavy typical SG. Okay, so I'm just going to come back over this side, and I think we're quite close on this side as it is, but what I'm just going to do is sort of tilt backwards and make sure that we're the slots are wide enough and tilted backwards as much as we can do. So this will be just kind of opening the slot a tiny bit, hardly, if anything, adjusting the height of the string, and the same again for this one. This one's pretty much at the right action anyway now, with the lowering. We haven't done the leveling yet, but I'm just going to do the widening and tipping backwards in. .46. So I'm just eyeballing the gap as well as checking it with looking for the shadow, the light coming through underneath. So it's still actually quite tall. So I'm going to cut backwards for the most properest angle. When I first got these Tusq files, I did find them quite difficult to get used to. They seem to take off quite a lot in one go if you weren't careful, because they are very effective. I think that probably was my fault for working for quite a long time with sort of slightly worn out Hiroshima files. There we are. Yeah, I think mine was slightly too worn out, and as a result it just didn't work very well. So what I'm going to do with this, I mean, you had to press hard for a long time, and then once you did that, you can switched over to a different kind of thing, and you ended up with going too quickly. So what I've got here is I've got a little bit of I'm actually, now what am I? I'm out of frog tape, totally out of frog tape. So I'm going to have to use masking tape for the time being, which is okay. It's just a bit less convenient. Yeah. So when you're working with not very good fret slot cutting files, you switch over to something that has got some effectiveness, then you can find yourself cutting through things pretty quickly without realizing it. It's actually quite hard to get this where I want it to go. What do I want to do? I just want to cover this off so that I can, well, I'll just keep the strings under there. That's probably a smarter thing to do. Yeah. This is not the best tape in the world. So I'm just going to basically cover this up, give it a little bit of protection while I just round off the edges here a little bit, because they're just fraction sharp. So there's a little bit of extra protection there with cheap throwaway paper. So you can do it whichever way you want. So you can get a file like one of these, or like one of these, a fret end file you could use, like so, or you could use a crowning file. And I've got a soft edge on these anyway. It's already been done a little bit on here, so there's a tiny bit of rounding off there, but it's actually a little bit sharper on the back here as well. So the other thing to remember is once you've taken the slots down a little bit, you've also got a bit of extra material on the nut that you don't strictly need. So you can take a file to it, and as long as you're careful and you don't, I'm just going to take this off now because I don't need it anymore. As long as you're careful and you don't go below the level of the slot that you've just carefully made, you should be fine to just take a bit of the material off. And sometimes you can do it, if you're going to change out your strings, you can actually do it with the string still in place, because you can just take the material that's above the string and you basically stop when you contact the string. Now you can hear it's hitting the string there, but in the trebly ends of things you've got room. But it's, you know, an old rule is not to have any more material above the string than you absolutely need, because it's just yeah, it's not necessary. This is a little proud here, so if we wanted to, we could go back into protection mode. Again, not as good as the frog tip, but a couple of sheets of this there, and a little bit on either side for the strings. And then we can probably just very lightly take a little bit of a edge to that, or a sand block to that, and then just round it around as we go. Just a little tiny tidying up edge, and you know, it just gets you that little bit close. It's not perfect. The problem with this is to absolutely get this perfect, you'd have to pretty much cut into the finish, because you can't get a flush finish without touching. You can't get a flush thing with the finish, or a thing flush with the finish without touching the finish. I mean, what I can do, for example, is I can go along here until I meet the nut with a blade, and I can just sort of see, it needs to be really sanded rather than try to cut, but you could sort of just round off the point where it joins a little bit, chisel a little bit, or shave is probably the better word, but it's still not ideal. I'm putting a little bit of a curve on this as well, chances are you'll pull the nut out of the slot and it will go firing off somewhere. So all I'm really trying to do with a bit of a curve on this blade is I'm just trying to lift off or just scrape off that lip that you can feel. It's nearly there. I mean, it's not easy to do. Better to get it right before you glue it down for those tiny details. Anyway, so there's the little details of the nut done. So we've got the first fret action tweaked, slots slightly widened, so it's at the ideal height. We've got very little neck relief at all, which is clearly the way that Phil has got it because he likes it that way. So the thing to do now is I'm going to slack off the strings, and this time I'm going to mark off the frets in order to do the leveling. So we're going to let's get the electronic undoer. Now it's the doer upper. Now it's the undoer, and the same for here and here and here. Okay, so we get our thingy, marker pen, and we go across the top of the fret. Sure, having this appears to be refretted in the past, so I'm sure it's been fret leveled sometime in the past too, but I guess what it won't have been done is leveled with the strings on and the neck under load, which is, in some ways you could say it's a little bit more accurate, and in a way that's neither here nor there. We're not really doing it just so that we can go, it's more accurate. We're doing it so that it levels the neck in the condition it is when you play the guitar, and that's the idea. And actually, funny enough, that's what the Plec system machine, whatever, tries to do very accurately and very computerizedly. And I'm not entirely sure, and I haven't seen it in its inside outs, but I have some secret theories that the Plec machine omits one of the characteristics or one of the aspects of the loading that I think is important, or seems to be important, and that's the longitudinal compression. I think the Plec seems to reproduce the curvature of the neck. Oh, let's see, this one wants to come out. That's not what we want. Start again. Anyway, I don't know enough to make a sensible statement. I do know that the system is all about trying to get the most accurate leveling possible. And it does it. It takes a pseudoscientific. It takes a scientific approach to doing it, which I'm a fan of. So I'm not going to criticise that. Right, now we're going to go up to pitch again. Give each one of these a little bit of a stretch just to seat them back on properly without breaking anything. And we'll do one more tuning. One other thing I noticed about Phil's guitar is that it was very well stretched out strings wise, so I could play it and have very little worry, or not spend much time retuning. I mean, a little bit out of tune on a couple of big bends, but near enough, all stretched out, which is great. I mean, the player of some 60 years, the man knows that he wants, like me, knows that he wants the guitar to be in tune. Or like Mr. Banks Mr. Banks in Mary Poppins. Winifred, when I sit at the piano, I expect it to be in tune. "But you don't play the piano, dear." To which she says, "That is entirely besides the point," or some such Lord of his castle type carry on. Anyway, but yeah, I don't settle for guitars being out of tune anymore. I used to. I spent my life with them out of tune, but I just will not play guitars that are out of tune. I mean, I'll make them so they stay in tune, and then I'll play them. But I can't be bothered if they're out of tune. I'll just keep passing them by. There's no point. It's the worst thing. If you're not musical, I know it sounds a bit snotty or snobby, but if you're not musical, very musical, some people can get by and they don't mind that it's not in tune. It doesn't bug them. But if you like musical togetherness, then you really do want it to be in tune with itself, you know. And some people don't care or notice when the intonation's wrong, so it's out of tune with itself, you could say, all the way up. Right, so I've just calibrated the start point of this guitar, the E track, and I'm going to gently work across all the frets and just see what we've got. So this is always a diagnostic moment, so I can see a high fret showing up and a couple of low frets showing up straight away, which is going to give us a sort of sense about what the basic topography of this neck is. So, and it's nothing too surprising. Ow, that hurt. So if I were to show you, sometimes you can see it better from. Can you see it better from this end? No, nowhere's better or worse really. Barely touching it. Oh, a little bit, hardly any. None, except there's a little bit there, but none on the edge. A fair bit there, cutting cleanly. None at all. That's a low fret. A low spot here, just coming back up, touching it, cutting, hardly, cutting fair bit. Down again, low. Up again, okay, up a bit more, down, nothing. So you can see that there are different areas in this. So the thing is it being held up by individual frets being high? Well, yes, individual high frets may be getting in the way, and if I had to pick a high fret out of all of this, I'd probably say that one there is high at that end. But actually more important, as most people will figure after they've been playing a few years, is the one that has the biggest effect overall is the low fret, because that one being low, if it is, makes this next one high and will choke out regardless of what all the others are doing. So the low frets tend to be the ones that dictate the play. So we have a low spot here, I'd say a single low fret there, and then everything's pretty good, a little bit of a low spot there, and then a little low spot right at the end there. So there's a few small ups and downs, but that, let me tell you, is completely standard. All guitars, well, most guitars have that. I tell you a guitar that didn't have that, and that was the Emerald carbon fibre guitar. The neck on that thing was like it was built by robots. I mean, it just, I hadn't played one before, and I certainly hadn't set one up, and as soon as I set it up, or went to set it up, it was obvious to my, having done 8 years of this sort of work, the first thing I noticed was, my God, every bit of this neck is straight. As in, if it's in a curve, it's a straight curve, perfect curve. There's no hills and valleys. This, the low spots are okay. They're still beneath the playing action that we've chosen, which is good. So I'm not going to do any more adjustment to there. I'm going to use the same calibration now for the B track. We'll see how that talks to us. And it may be that there's very little required. I think what this will probably do is it will lower the action for fill, and what I'll also do in it is I'll take away some of the slight fret slap, which would have increased, probably has increased now we've lowered the action a little bit. So we're just, you know, basically going for what he wanted, which is as low as possible in action with you know, good choke, buzz and choke free playing. Okay, so we have things change as you come across the radius shape. Now we're hitting a higher fret here. That one's just touching, but it's still a low fret which we kind of know. The low end here is now coming back into play as not a low fret, and the just about touching here is now cutting here a fair amount, so it's got a higher spot in the middle. Again, probably nothing to worry about within this whole sort of mix. What matters is that each note now will play, and that bends going across those parts of the frets will also play without choking or buzzing. Pretty good. A little tiny squelchy muddy bit at the 12th, that's all. So all I do is I do this magical non-technical thing, and I say I'm just going to do a bit more, and I'm going to concentrate, and I sort of center my finger on the 12th fret area where I'm doing this, and it's, I suppose I'm pushing a little bit extra down there, and I'm just going to do it. And you see I'm moving from side to side to cover the radius and don't put a flat spot on it by staying in one spot. I mean, it's a thin enough bar relatively to the bar that most people use for fret leveling, so it's far less likely to put a flat spot than most tools, but to avoid it anyway I keep moving it. That bit's better now. Still a tiny squelch at 12, but not bad, not enough to worry about. Now normally what happens is, it's when you come over to the G track, coming towards the centre of the neck, is where you find the slight unevenness that causes any choke out when you're bending notes high up on the E string. And again, it's a geometric challenge because you're pushing the string up a radius hill, if you like, and it's the fact that the string is at the top of the hill, it's higher than the points where the string goes back down to, which tends to be, if it's an E, the string comes up the hill like this, and it's low here and it's much higher here at the top of the hill, and that discrepancy cuts out some, or takes away some of the clearance it originally had. Now what did I do? I just calibrated, didn't I? Yes, I did. So now is the time to run the thing. So now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just lightly do this, and then I'm going to do a couple of bends and see what we get in terms of any zinging and zizzing, and I think we should be okay, because I've got a feeling this there was very little in the way of choking out, but there still was a tiny zing, which will have probably increased due to the lowering of the action, so I wouldn't be surprised if we had reintroduced some, and this is where we want to take it away. So as I said, the zinging or choking out tends to come with a high E bent up into the G track. So when I hear it going zing, it's pretty good, I have to say. Can't even bend it that far. I'm such a wimp. But if you find it zinging like that, what I tend to do is hold it there, and I move my plectrum to where the bend is happening, and I can see it's on, well, it's kind of running out of room on the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th fret, just to this side of the G. So what I'm going to do, like before, 16th fret this side of the G, my side of the G, so 12, 13, 14, 15, 16th, there it is. I'm even going to turn my truss rod round this time, don't ask me why, and I'm just going to concentrate my pressure, a little bit of downward pressure at that point of the fingerboard. And what I'm trying to do is just level out the frets there. If there's a low spot causing that zinging, then we're just bringing everything else just in tune or in line with that. The amounts I'm doing it are absolutely tiny. You don't have to do much, but it just about clears away. Still there. Right. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 16 and 17, I'm just going to do a tiny bit more on there. But I mean, for a Telecaster with a 1.3mm action at the last fret, it's pretty well done. It's playing pretty well. So I'm just taking a little bit more time on those two frets, no harm at all, just to level things down in relation to each other, because the point about fret leveling is it's always relative, and that's why some people who go at it with a single block and sort of scrape down a particular spot, you can get yourself out of problems that way, but you stand a good chance of creating other problems, because leveling one thing creates a discrepancy between that and the next thing, if you see what I mean. So you don't want to be doing that. It's much better to achieve a relative levelness by doing them all together, even if it costs a tiny bit of extra fret metal and everything else. If you want the overall low action effect, then you have to pay for it all over the board slightly. So now we're on the D track, and I'm just sort of looking to see what the lie of the land is here. And this also blends into the G track, so it's kind of has a bearing on our high bends. But as I said, at a 1.3-ish action on this Telecaster is a pretty adventurous target. So we've got what looks like a very flat, or not very flat, but a fairly tall fret here. There's that one there, but I think we'll just see how it works. I'm using 400 grit paper, so it's not taking much of the time. It's very conservative. It's nice. I'm happy with that. Now move down to the calibrating for the A track, and I just calibrate for 5 out of the 6, for the simple reason that I can't calibrate to that side of the high E because there's no fingerboard to do it on. So I calibrate inside the side of the E, and then I use that for the B as well. So it's technically I'm using the B strings calibration for the E, high E, and this is all good, so I can just carry on. Again, it's a practically flat neck, or very nearly flat neck, which again adds to the feel of the low action. So low physical action at both ends plus a very flat neck equals all over the feel of a very low slick action. But of course, the minute you reduce the playing action and or the flatten out the neck relief, then you are likely to run into the uneven frets, any uneven frets making themselves known, because they at that point, it's like I described it the other day to someone as like the tide falling and exposing a rock that's sitting under the waterline, and while the water's deep enough, your yacht doesn't care because you can sail right over it. So let's see, we've got some bit of zizz going on all around here, so I'm going to do some more. Yeah, so as you lower the action, you'll think about lowering the tide in this example, and eventually it comes to a point where the tide has gone down and it's exposed this rock, and the rock suddenly is an obstruction, and it will have an impact on how your guitar plays in the case of the uneven frets. But you can have, in fact, when I do this leveling, I still leave unevenness in the frets, only this method allows me to leave the unevenness below, as long as it's below the target action we're aiming for. I don't go chasing it. There's no point leveling frets for a setting below the action we're going to set. You're just doing it, for an intellectual pursuit, really, at that point. Okay, so I think this will be about where I want to stop on this, just in terms of, it's not bad. This has a very small amount of what I would call slap, just following it. But I said I'd do it, but I always do one more than I say I'm going to do, because I usually wimp out far too early. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a tiny bit more here, and I'm going to concentrate on very little pressure at all. I just want to backwards and forwards it, sides to sides it a little bit. And the reason for this is what I want the truss rod to do is I want it to inverted commas, impose its curvature, the exact nature of its curvature onto the fingerboard, fretboard, sorry, of this guitar. So usually we saw when we did the first leveling, you saw the ups and downs in the neck, the inherent ups and downs, the hills and valleys. And when you set the neck relief like this, what you're doing is you're kind of approximating a curve, and doing so with a tool that will make a smoother curve than the neck actually is. So we've taken 3 points in the hilly topography of the neck, and we've used them to set a curve on the truss rod, and the truss rod sets a smoother curve than the actual hilly thing we're trying to level. And so when we're at this stage, you can see that what I'm doing is I'm imposing what you might call a more ideal curve, this tool, onto a less than ideal hilly overall topography of the fretboard. And so by pressing this onto it, or just gently letting it work onto it, it sort of tames the natural waviness with the smooth curve, and it sort of imprints that curve a little bit onto the top of there, which is what it's doing. And that way it gets to clear up a lot of the slap. And a little bit of still some inherent in there, but not as bad as it was when we started. But you know, just double, treble checking. We are at 1.6 mils, which is a pretty low thing. I'll just do a little bit more at this end, and then we'll call it quits. I mean, the thing about this is that knowing what it started out with in terms of fret slap, it's going to be improved on that, including having a lower action. So that's the target for this, is to improve it, certainly not to give it back how it was. I'm just doing a little bit of extra far end leveling. Okay. Okay, I'm going to stop there. That's where it's going to get to. And now I'm going to undo the strings, slack them off, and clean up the fingerboard a little bit. And chop these strings away. And then I'm going to do the boring bit, which I usually do off camera, but no, I won't. I'll just keep it running this time because it's not a very long setup anyway. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to recrown the frets just now, and then we'll get into sanding and polishing out the frets so that they are nice and smooth again. Oh, and while this is off, we'll have a little peek under the hood. And also, before I do that, while I'm here, I must remember to take the knobs off and tighten up the pots, because they're turning round, which we don't want. And see if we can see why there's a obstruction in one of them. So let's get our leveling stuff out of the way. Over there, you up there, onto the big magnets. I'll get that cloth, not the cleanest one, didn't want to be. Just get a cloth to. Stuff coming off, by the way, is binding from scraping the guitars last night. I'll clean off most of this stuff. What I'm going to do is quickly mark up the frets again, ready for recrowning. But we'll take and look under the bonnet. The bonnet, as the English gentleman would call the hood of his car. Bonnet. Bonnet, that's a hair thing, isn't it? I mean a hat. So your engine wears a bonnet, probably. Kind of, sort of has a logic to it. Right, let's go with auto. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is, do you wish to come closer and have a better view? I'm sure you do. Straight downward view. Right, let's just have a look. Let's just have a quick look in here. Sort of slot screwdriver. Something, the pot itself is moving all right, but so it's the, I think the lid, the thing, the knob is getting in the way, and this one actually doesn't. They're turning, and I don't really know why. So let's just get a quick look under here and make sure we know why it's turning. It shouldn't be turning, but it was trying to. Maybe the pot was turning. Sorry, maybe the knob was turning and not the actual. Okay, that's probably a right thing, because these feel pretty well done up. Nice little wiring kit under there. We've got a treble bleed fitted. See that? The capacitor with the transistor going across the legs. We've got a paper and oil capacitor there. 0.47 and nice big pots. So good quality equipment in there. But I don't think the pots are actually turning. That was what was worrying me. But what I think is happening is it's the knobs themselves which is turning. So we shall return this little fella back into there. Set this on 1 and we'll refit these. Thank you. From long practice I've learned to support these little screws until they start going in to avoid falling over sideways. Now I think one of the reasons why this may these pots may not perform brilliantly is because I have a feeling, let me just try something, I have a feeling that the smooth, what do they call that, solid shaft on the CTS pots, solid shaft is, yeah, they're not gripping it exactly. So, okay, well look, I've put that one back on with a tiny gap underneath so that it's not grinding against whatever it was grinding against. So that's moving freer and it's not turning around, so doing it up tighter. Now this one wasn't grinding at all, but just to be visually equal, I think I should give it the same lift, don't you? Yes, I think you should. Thank you. I will do so. And get that little bit of an extra bite as well. So, okay. I mean, they're just above. Sometimes what you find is the skirt of the pot clips the hexagonal nut. Hexagonal? Is it hexagonal? Probably. Okay, so now I'm just going to have a quick looky under here. This hasn't got a pickguard mounted pickup, so the pickup is wood mounted. I just want to look at the way it's been put in place. See if there's anything does need doing with it, but like I say, it's largely not broken, and unless there's some serious reason why we need to put any effort into coming up with another solution, we just need to be cautious about changing things just for the sake of them. Okay, so there's my bits and bobs, and there it is. Yes, so a little bit of sticky tape holding that flat down here. That's okay. So let me give you a quick close up. So it's a hand adjusted. I see the thing he's talking about. It's a hand adjusted enlarged hole. So the original pickup in there would have been a slot one, not presumably not with the V-shaped, not accommodating a V-shaped base plate, and this has been hand sort of chiselled to fit. And you know, once it's underneath the pick guard, who cares really? It works. There's a piece of paper in here keeping it firmly stood up, and that's absolutely fine. What you don't want to do is shove anything under that side, because you'll run a risk of breaking the fine wires and the thing won't work anymore. So I'm not going to fix, in inverted commas, something that isn't broke. So that's just there for now. What I am going to do is give everything just a little dust. I'm not going to bother with trying to clean this all up. This thing kind of, it works because it's a working looking guitar. It's got mojo, it's got style. What I don't want to be doing is cleaning this up and trying to make something look like it just came out of the shop, because it didn't. Now when it comes to pickups in the neck position like this, yeah, fair enough, make them look a bit shiny because they're chrome, that just as that is, but I wouldn't go to huge lengths. There's a bit of enlargement in the hole here, the hole for a chunkier pickup, and the corner is just a little bit, what's the word, squared off, so I'm just going to help it along with a tiny bit of scalpel tweak, if I can, just to round it a tiny bit, just so the eye isn't drawn straight to that spot. Okay. That's just me and my fiddly perfectionist. So this just fits in there, but that little piece of sticky tape does sort of help to hold it down, since there are no screws there. Sometimes scratch plates like this can buckle upwards a little bit. Hold it until it's in place, and then we're on a 1 torque, so it's pretty safe. It will just go in and bite. Or go in and spin on the ratchet, I should say. So mainly, the reason my hand is there is so that this thing can't slip off or run off to the side. I've put too many things in my own guitars in the past. You know, you don't want to be doing everything by hand, but if you do use a mechanical driver, you need to have a strategy for using it safely, so it doesn't end up jumping around. And once it's gripping, you can use it safely. Right, so the next thing to do now, I seem to have brought down a magnet with me that will belong to something that usually hangs up on the wall there. I'll leave that again in a minute. Right, so the thing to do now is to do the re-crowning, and for that I'm going to use the legendary StewMac crowning file. This little ruler's fallen off again. Crowning file and a wire brush just to keep the things clean. Now I'm going to use a medium jumbo side of this thing and start from there. So over the top, and the aim is to round off the flat spots on the frets. By definition, as you level, you put a flat spot on the fret. That's how you achieve levelness. But you don't want that plateau, you want that height of fret, but with a curved arch shape. And the way you do that then is to use this crowning file, which rounds off the square or flat edges of your fret that you've just made with your leveling activities, and it allows you to kind of work that flat spot down until you end up with just a tiny thin line of this black pen across the top of your fret, and that, leaving that little line of black pen as thin as you can make it, lets you know that you haven't lowered the fret any. So long as there's black marker pen there, your fret is still as high as it was when you finished leveling. And so it's a great guide to allow you to do this re-crowning, but to not end up changing the level, because that would be counterproductive since we just spent time making it level. You wouldn't want to go and undo all of that, would you? No, you wouldn't. Anyway, so I'm looking for the next spray day. I've got Nick's 7/8 style shape-sized Strat custom to spray. Now, that's only going to get about 4 coats of satin nitro, but I'm going to be using my Apollo HVLB, high volume low pressure spray system, and I'm going to need to clean that ready, or check it and clean it ready before use. I haven't used it since last year, and I'm also going to need to clean it after each session, ready for use again. But the HVLP is nice in that I can buy the volume of nitro in a big 5 litre can. In fact, I've got 2 5 litre cans here, and I can make up a cup of stuff and do a whole session, make up some more. I mean, make up some more, it doesn't need any prepping, it needs just filtering into the cup. And what I will also be doing is I'll be adding some spirit stain, tiny bit of spirit, or a little bit of spirit stain into the mix, because certainly on Nick's Strat I'm going to want to be getting a I suppose you could be a tobacco brown tint. It wants to be clear satin finish, but it wants to have a tobacco brown tint, such that when it's 4 coats or so are on, which is all I want to put on, when it wears back, it will wear back to, you'll see the contrast difference between the sprayed finish and the raw wood underneath. So it's got to have enough colour in the finish to be ideally clearly visible when it's relicked away or worn away by use, shall we say. So that's going to be an interesting sort of home chemistry. Well, it's not. It's just going to be very simple. It's going to be, let's put a couple of drops in, spray it and see what it does. And if I totally overcook it and it's too dark, then I just take it all off and start again, sand it all off. But obviously I'm limited by conditions, atmospheric conditions usually. I can control the temperature inside here to some degree, but it's not an ideal spraying space. It's generally speaking, spraying with nitro is a much more straightforward proposition in the summer, when the days are naturally more less humid, I should say, more drier. And in an ideal world, I can use the other room, which it has to be cleaned up and kind of hoovered and vacuumed, I should say, and swabbed down and given as much cleaning as possible, because sometimes during the year, in the winter, I use it as a sawdust room, for bulk routing stuff, and then in the summer I have to clean it up if I want to take advantage of the space to do spraying. So while the atmospherics might be good for spraying, the space isn't very good, so it takes a good clean up. But then once it's done, I can sort of spray to my heart's content, and I don't end up with an absolute ton of dust all over every other thing. The room gets dusty out there, but I can leave it all settle and try and vacuum it all out another day. So that's the plan anyway. But I think with the way the weather's looking, I need to get Nick's 7/8 Strat finish painted up sooner rather than later, and I don't think we'll have the sort of big summery weather for a while yet. So I will probably do it in this space, which means I'll be kind of just artificially controlling it. Again, making it as clean as possible beforehand, mixing up prepping some colour spray and shooting it, and leaving it, I don't know, half an hour between coats, and then 20 minutes between coats, and then probably getting it all done in one day, which would be good. And then with the I've got 5 of these Firebirds, left-handed Firebirds. I think those will be, they'll be just clear, there won't be any colour in those. And I will have to use, I would like to use the larger space if possible. If in a couple of weeks' time there's a single good day coming along, I'll happily jump at the opportunity. But if not, then I'll have to do them in this small space, which just means I'm going to get an absolute ton of, it's not overspray, but the dust that you get from the finish. But it's okay because it sits on things and it just makes them dusty. It doesn't discolour them or do anything, you just wipe them off. So I don't really panic about it. It's more important to have a space you can use than to not have one. So here we go with the prepping or protecting the fingerboard stage. I always have nerves when I'm covering up a clear finish over a maple, or a tinted finish over a maple board, because actually with Partscasters it's usually pretty fine, pretty good, but with some Mexican, particularly some Mexican Fenders, this is a hair-raising process because they seemed for a period of time to have an adhesion problem on their finishes, maple board finishes, and you can be preparing to sand out and polish a set of frets, and you put the tape onto low-tack tape, you put it on to protect the fingerboard, and lo and behold, it comes off, the finish comes off in great crispy flakes. So when that happens, you're faced with a complete refinish, which can be a depressing sort of thing. Now, I need to move this out of the way in order to, I'll just put it to the side here. I've kind of prepped some more, call it, this stuff. I've got, I need to cut some more. I've got some old stuff on here. Each time I tend to have more than I need, but it doesn't, sometimes it gets stuck to the board and I would rather start again. I do need a new board because this one is almost shredded from all the blade cuts I've done, as you can see. I'm just going to clear all this off and start with some new masking tape. Come off, will you? Hellfire! This does not want to let go its hold. Anyway, so I'm going to cut a bunch of thin bits of tape so I can mask off. You can buy these different sizes of tape, but to me that's a bit of an expensive malarkey. I'd rather, where possible, use cheap low-tack masking tape and cut it to size. I don't think sort of chucking money away on something that like this that really, it's a continual consumable. You don't want to be spending good money on it. Yes, parts and components and stuff like that spend good money because they're going to stay around, but consumables just go straight in the bin each time. Anyway, so my usual thing is to just prep a load of strips and then cut them into sections with a blade and a ruler and work off that. So it's a fiddly bit that I often don't put on camera because as you can see, it's mind-numbingly exciting. Not. Oops. Anyhow, so it is March, ladies and gentlemen, and March is on the cusp of spring, and spring to me means warmer. That's the first thing it means, because when you get to a certain age you crave just those warm sunny days that you can be outside. I mean, you can be outside all year round, but I'm not a great drizzle walker, or I like to be outside when it's mellow and nice weather. I blame my Caribbean ancestry. Yes. Having been born in Trinidad a long time ago and spent the first few years of my life there, I need, the Blackadder, I need warm weather like an ostler needs his ossels. That's Blackadder goes forth, Georgina, the lovely Georgina, the darling of the trenches, after her triumphant appearance at the show. King and Country, was it King? No, King and Country was a magazine cover, wasn't it? For you Blackadder fans, you'll know what I'm talking about. The great thing about Blackadder is that you only have to quote a line, and it brings a whole scene and a whole feeling and a whole kind of mood and episode to mind. It's amazing, the scripts, or how much a word-based thing that was. And the reason I know that is that I often, having watched it a few times, plenty of times, like everyone who likes Blackadder, I no longer need to watch it, so I only really ever listen to it now. But I still put on the video, or although I have the audio book versions, but if the video's playing, I just leave it in the background, because it's like that when you know something so well you don't need to see it. And it is proof that all of Blackadder's humour was word humour. Very, very little visual, despite Rowan Atkinson being the most incredible visual comic. In fact, maybe I'm being unkind, and other critics would say that's nonsense, that statement, that it wasn't the visual. Of course it was. He was a great visual comic, and you think of Blackadder, you think of his kind of sardonic expression as he plots the downfall yet again of, oh shit, I forgot to cut the line down the middle, Egypt, as he plots some harebrained scheme to steal money off the prince or whatever. But what I mean by the fact that it's linguistic, it's script-based humour, is that you can watch it, listen to it a million times more than you watch it. It's still great. Anyway, Blackadder, copyright adder. Don't get caught. So anyway, this is the mind-numbingly boring bit. Yes. It is funny, isn't it, how you get those things that you share in common with people that have a code word. I suppose it used to be, in the olden days, it would be a Monty Python code word. Whenever something are gathered together, something. There was always a sort of like a code that would identify you, or an X parrot, and everyone knew who you were, and it short-circuited. I remember at school it short-circuited who you would like, because your friends had to like the same comedy stuff as you. So it'd be a sort of you'd have a test phrase to see if they were Monty Python fans or Blackadder fans or whatever, and if they weren't, you probably never got on with them thereafter. This board has had its day, and it is definitely picking up more bits of the white stuff than I really want it to, so it's getting right in the way. But you just have to live with it. You've got to roll with it. I was watching something a little while back where Dave Simpson was pulling his hair out, the remaining hair, complaining about the insanity of the copyright system that's running in YouTube. And he's not the only one. There's millions of content producers. I remember watching Rick Beato talking about it, how he'd got some ridiculous strike for using so many notes. Same with Dave. You know, they'd given him a copyright strike, claiming that certain chords he'd used belonged to somebody. You know, and it's like, how can you do, you know, a couple of phrases? How can that, a couple of chords, a chord progression, as part of a chord progression? How can that truly be? How can you give that ownership to somebody? And I guess you probably, in law, you probably couldn't. If it came down to a solid challenge, there would have to be a kind of ad absurdum type of point. I don't know what I mean by that. You know, a point where it just, every rational person would say, no, wait a minute, we can't take this to this extreme, because we will not be able to utter a sound without being billed by another human being who happens to have been owned that syllable, or, you know, it just is absurd. There's a point at which you can't run the world. But I think we've passed that already. But I think the problem is that there haven't been enough cases yet to challenge its stupidity. So what you're finding is a bit like, you know, in the Russian world of the Russian bloggers who may be anti the war in Ukraine, but they're more frightened of being put in a Russian jail, so they self-censor or leave the country. But I notice a lot of the people who are angry about copyright abuse, or abuse of the copyright law in YouTube, now have almost no content that has any risk. You know, they've modified themselves to take away the risk of running foul of the copyright, draconian copyright algorithms and laws. You know, so nobody can teach guitar licks anymore without getting a strike. You know, and the only ones who kind of don't care or you know, agree to share their whatever it is, revenues, you know, are people who are not dependent. You know, luckily for them, they're not dependent on the revenue usually. But yeah, I mean, so when's it going to happen? Same with the removing all contentious issues about, for example, the war in Ukraine, because Google thinks it's it's an unsavoury subject for their family safe advertisers, and they don't want anyone's advertising dollar falling in the same space as some uncomfortable issues about stories about Ukrainian soldier prisoner being murdered on screen, that sort of thing. And I hear them all the time going, "Oh no, that will get me demonetized." And frankly, if I say something that will get me demonetized, tough. I don't care. I care that I can use YouTube to do what I do, because I've used YouTube effectively to bring me qualified customers, which is far better. It's been very useful for me. But I absolutely decided from the outset that there was no way in hell I was ever going to chase ad revenues, because I have no intention of having to either chase likes and do stupid attention-grabbing, ass-kissing things in order to get likes and clicks, because I can't starve without them, or to have to self-censor all the time in such a way that Google thinks I'm acceptable enough, and therefore my content is continually what's the word? You know what I mean? Compromised by the need to make a living. So it would be different if Google said to me tomorrow, "You talk about the Ukraine war one more time, even in generalities, and we will shut down your account so that you can no longer show any videos, and you'll no longer get any of these nice qualified prospects coming to your door, courtesy of your content in YouTube." And I'd have to then think very carefully about what I did from that point, because it's a very useful source of prospects, customers. Anyway, but bloody stupid thing. But YouTube hasn't done that to that level yet. But I'm sure, given time, they probably will, because ultimately everybody, well, they will do anything, everything ultimately to make money, and I guess that will come right to the point of saying, well, you know how you were getting all this endless video storage for free, because that's how our business model worked. Well, we've kind of decided to change that now, and that if you want to keep all your Reloved Guitars 800 plus videos, brackets, we know how useful they are to get you customers in through the front door, but if you want to keep those up there and continue to enjoy the luxury of qualified customers, we're going to ask you to pay X amount per gigabyte of storage per year or whatever. Now the thing is, I currently pay for premium YouTube anyway, and the reason I did that was I think I might have said so in the previous video, but I did it because I was paying a couple of different subscriptions, Spotify, this and that, and I didn't really want to have multiple things doing video and music, and quite frankly I don't watch Netflix. I think the content on there is dross for my likings. YouTube is a much more interesting place to find stuff to watch for me. So I thought, well, if I'm going to pay for a subscription, I might as well I ought to just pay for the one that I really gain value from and cut down the rest. So what I did was I binned Spotify and things like that, and signed up for premium YouTube. And some people say, "Are you stupid? Why are you paying them $12.99 a month?" And I thought, well, if I was going to support a single online business, I would much prefer to support the ones that I actually find productive or profitable in my business model. So why wouldn't I want to support it as well as watch its content? But there is a part of it that's going to forever be outside of my control, and that is, this is why I don't normally video this, because it's just noisy. The part outside my control is if Google gets, or YouTube, whoever, gets ultimately completely greedy and puts in so much advertising that I don't see because I'm paying for premium, but everyone else is having the worst possible viewing experience and they're leaving the platform rather than paying, then I'm kind of have to sit up and take notice, because I will then be supporting a sinking ship. But you can't insure against everything all the time, and I figured, for as long as I need it, I'll probably, hopefully, get YouTube to work the way I need it to still, more or less, and meanwhile also be building up a reputation wider than just YouTube, so that if YouTube died tomorrow, I'd still get a reasonable amount of business, if not as much as I do currently. But let's hope that YouTube smartly monetizes its platform and doesn't risk driving people away and causing it to go under. So as you can see, this is the fun sanding, polishing part of the game, and it's just elbow grease. That's what it is. I see people do different things, and some of them hardly do any sanding at all. Some people just rub a couple of rubs with fret rubbers and they're away. But I go through a huge amount of papers, and even then sometimes I wish I could do more. And then, how long you keep going is anyone's guess. So yeah, it's funny to kind of project forward and imagine, you know, what happens when you really can't play a single tune for it sounding like a few notes that someone else used. And I guess that, you know, you have to measure it by how intrusive it is as a creator. So, you know, I think, you know, the only time I would play anything would be messing around to demonstrate a guitar or whatever, and I'm always likely to do it anyway because I'm not really confident in my playing. But occasionally, you know, I'll play a little bit of stuff and bits and pieces, and something will sound like, you know, vaguely recognisably like something else. And actually, the only time I've ever had a copyright warning was actually when I decked for my mate's band, and we put up some bits of video of that night, and I was almost honoured when YouTube said, copyright strike, you have been playing Ziggy Stardust and Spiders from Mars, you know, owned by such and such Music Inc. or whatever, and it said something like, you can, in this case, you don't have to take it down, but it'll either be demonetised or you'll share the monetized, whatever. And the amount of money was, you know, peanuts. It was just a video for friends, you know. So I didn't care either way. But so that's really very unintrusive to my day-to-day stuff. But I can really, I think there would be a serious problem if every time I played two notes on the guitar, the thing said, those two notes are owned by, you know, John Smith, and you've played them, and therefore he wants to either take your ad revenue earnings, or he's telling you in your territory you must remove your content or face a copyright strike. So that's fantasy world, but someone like Dave Simpson and many other sort of guitar teachers and guitar people definitely do get some direct hassle from the music licensing people, and it seems to be that funny part is the obvious part, I suppose, is that they seem to they get algorithms that pull up the matches, and then they have a human department that checks on the likely earning potential and popularity of the site, basically to see whether there's an earning potential by attacking, say, Justin Sanderco, for example. And then they go after the person and say, let me share your content, or I'll take you down, or I'll, you know, push the copyright strike with YouTube. So it seems to be not necessarily, it isn't just if you use a particular song you'll definitely automatically get into trouble. Although it sounds like if the algorithm picks you up, it'll flag you and say, you know, either such and such or such and such. But the ones where it gets really messy or harsh are when it's the algorithm and the human agent then says, there's some money to be made here, and they see a chance of earning a spring bonus by you know, co-opting half of Rick Beato's proceeds for a particular popular lesson on, you know, some rock great, you know, and that's what they do. And you know, I guess you can understand it in the human scope of things. You know, if there is a concept of intellectual property, and if the law allows you to chase it and protect it, stroke capitalise on it, then I guess it's to be expected. And then but the other question that comes in is, what is the what is the smallest meaningful unit that you can claim ownership of? And I think that's certainly where Dave Simpson was really freaking out when the licensing company decided that just a sequence of chords was owned by a copyright holder, and you just think, well, hang on, you know, how can that be? Because there are only a finite number of possible sequences, of course. But then I suppose the thing you can't separate out is that Dave was getting popular at that stage anyway. So for all we know, it could have been one of trillions of, oh yeah, look, there's three chords out of Jumping Jack Flash there. Oh yeah, leave it. Or Gump. It's enough to send an automated one, or flag up over 100,000 whatever viewers, therefore earning potential worth pursuing and being litigious about. And of course, I guess they'll just carry on doing that, won't they? But it is kind of grisly to watch and see what this smallest reducible unit of music is going to be. Weird. Okay, so you've managed to stay with me. I haven't even checked the recording, so it could have shut down for lack of power or memory or anything. I don't have enough infinite amount of space on this thing. It seems to be continuing to go, an hour and 30 in. So you can see now I have done the, what's that thing called? Sanding and polishing, and there's a bit of dust that's caught up on the pick guard here that I'm going to clean off. And then we'll be into taking new strings and stretching them out, followed by setting the intonation. Now, is that all we dealt with? Oh yeah, we had a look at the underside. There was no change, really sensible change to make there, where how the that thing pickup was fitted. We've done the string tree. It actually seems to be in a good enough place, so I'm not going to overwork that for the sake of a small movement. And we've got the frets leveled and polished out through that process you just suffered through with me. Now I'm going to put new strings on. In fact, it managed to clean up the fingerboard quite a bit from how it was, so it's nicer. It's lost quite a bit of the black, quite a few of the black marks that were here and there. There we are. Okay. So that, as Phil knows, the secret to tuning stability is twofold. It's your nut and the amount of stretch or slack, unreleased stretch in your strings. And normally I will take care of the slack, take care of the reducing or making the least amount of friction possible in the nut by fitting a Tusq nut. But in this case, because Phil's attached to bone as a nut substance, we're sticking with that, and so we still need to make the most effort possible to ensure that the strings run smoothly through that nut without friction, and also that the nut is, the slots are cut to give a low first fret action. Now technically the first fret action can be as low as about 0.1 of a millimetre, which is kind of about the height it is when you use a capo on a normally set up guitar, not on a slide guitar, but on a standard guitar with standard inverted commas range of action. A capo on the first fret will give you a new first fret action of about 1/10 of a mil. So we could technically set all of our strings as low as that, but my experience has been to keep it in a conservative, safe range of, and I stick to 0.3 of a mil over the first fret, and that tends to allow me, if I can get this string through, that keeps it safely out of the zone where you get notes going sharp at the first, when fretted near the nut, I should say. And that's really another one of the major reasons of why you want to take care of the first fret action and the nut slots. So it's to get friction-free movement of the string through the slots. Sorry, I've got magnets going, or AWOL out here. Yeah, as little friction as possible, and the ideal first fret action. That's what we're after. So I'm going to put on the new strings. My way of doing this is to pull the string taut and pull it 2 pegs behind the one you're using. And you have to be very careful about that, because if you pull the wrong one and line it up with the wrong thing, you end up with not enough. And I've done that more than once by not paying enough attention. So then I put this on here, and there I go. Okay. That one to beyond there. Put it in, down, bend over, bend over, screw it up. There we are. Third string, 2 past the post. So if you can trademark or copyright or whatever it is a slogan like "Just Do It," that's a very old one. There's probably lots of modern ones that I don't know anything about, but if you could trademark one of those, does that mean I'm technically not allowed to use it the way I just did, or that I have to do it with a little acknowledgement at the bottom of the video saying thanks to Nike Corporation for the loan of the "Just Do It" slogan, all rights reserved, yada yada? Or is there some sort of thing that says you can't possibly copyright a phrase? Well, apparently you can if it's, I guess if it's used in an advertising context, because otherwise they wouldn't have any of that TM or R or whatever they have in its little bubble or next to the letter. So there must be some sort of context in which it's protected, but I used it just then, and maybe a copyright trademarking court would decide that that was fair use, eh? In everyday language, can it? There we are. So get my leftover bit and frozen away. And then the first thing I'm going to do is give it a little pull, just to sort of bed things in. And then I'll tune up, and then we'll do some stretching and tune up again, and so on and so forth. And the idea is to keep on doing it until you can stretch it and it no longer goes out of tune. What if I could copyright the tuning sequence? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. The notes E, A, D, G, B and E in that order are the property of Real Love Guitars. TM Inc. Copyright. All rights reserved. 2023. So anyone who tries to tune their guitar on the video channel will have to pay me the share of the royalties, the revenues, and I reserve the right to take down. See that little pingy noise? That's the butterfly. That's why I hate them. Yes, they'll have to share in their royalties, and I will become rich and miserable. Right, another stretching, thumb and four fingers, and then we will be pretty much done. Now, I don't like the way these saddles let the strings move around unless you put a notch in them, or unless a notch is worn in them. The two ones by definition for a 9.5 radius or lower, they have to be like that, which means they can tip the string off center and they end up in a funny position. We're very close. I'll play it at home and stretch it the last bit of the way. What I'm going to do now is check the intonation. Now the intonation is a very personal thing. It really comes down to how any of us presses the string down when fretting. So while we can get as close as we can to, inverted commas, correctly intonated, we can never be certain, because it just happens that if Phil presses frets differently from me, he may well put a different force on the strings, on the strings while fretting, and as a result his strings may go sharp, whereas mine might not. So the secret is you tune to the harmonic ping and then fret it. That's a fraction sharp. We'll see what the B does. That's on. It's on. On. So if I think the E is fractionally sharp, then it means it's slightly too short, which means it needs to go back a little bit, but we can't really do much about that because they're in a pair, so I think we have to settle for the closest we can get between them, and I think, to be honest, that's about good. It's where it is. If they were individual saddles, we could move the E on its own, but I don't want to. You have to compromise always somewhere between the two, and that wasn't so far out on the E that I would want to move the B to accommodate for that, so I will leave it as is. So there it is, the beastie done, with the action drop down by about 1 millimetre at the, on the bass side, and about 0.5 of a mil on the treble side. Let's just double check that. Shouldn't change at all. Yeah, we're about, actually that's barely 1.5 actually. Yeah, that's about one. That's pretty good. That's about 1.3. It's pretty low. In fact, it's probably too low. So if we were to raise that up a tiny bit, the other way around. Raise, Sam. If we were to raise that to the 1.5 we were targeting at, to about there. There, perfect. There we have it, done. Feels homemade, beautiful to play. I really enjoyed this guitar, Telecaster. Yeah, what a nice guitar for a homemade thing. A lot of love and mojo has gone into this, and it really does the business. I like it. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.